Hi, Brian Crombie here, Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We've got a few minutes left, and I thought I couldn't let this moment in history pass without mentioning it. This past weekend, we lost two incredible human beings. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice, someone who you couldn't help but follow her career, some of the unbelievably important things that she has argued for civil liberties, for women's rights, for against anti-abortionists, et cetera, in the United States. And then also John Turner, former Prime Minister of Canada, on the weekend. I grew up in Montreal. My parents were involved in Montreal society when John Turner was a young lawyer in Montreal. And my father worked for IBM. John Turner's wife worked at IBM. And so they were in some of the same social circles. And we heard all the stories at the time about John Turner and how he was destined for greatness within Canadian politics. In 1968, I went and heard both John Turner and Pierre Elliott Trudeau speak. What a great opportunity. In 1984, I worked on the leadership campaign for John Turner in a very small way, but was unbelievably impressed with the work that he did as finance minister during the Trudeau government. Thought that he was one of the key parts of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau government. I think that during the early 1970s, during the War Measures Act and during the time period when some people on Bay Street and in Quebec had lost confidence in Pierre Elliott Trudeau, John Turner was one of the reasons why they stayed. And then in 1988, I was at Harvard Business School, and I did a mini thesis on the Canadian Free Trade Agreement and studied the Royal Macdonald Commission that had produced 26 volumes about free trade and the desire for it, but also argued very strenuously for a guaranteed annual income and transitional adjustment assistance, because what it said was free trade was going to be very good for some people, but very damaging to a lot of other people, and that we needed some assistance. And I wrote that paper and loved the research, and I had the opportunity to interview numerous different people. I interviewed former NDP Premier Barrett from British Columbia. I interviewed numerous different people that were at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and I had an opportunity to talk to the leader of the official opposition at the time, John Turner. And it was an incredible opportunity. And then during the 1988 election, John Turner staked his career and probably his political reputation on being anti-free trade. And he argued very strenuously about how for 120 years we had had this east-west and up to the Arctic structure of our gravity within Canada, but that Brian Mulroney, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, with the free trade agreement, was going to give us a north-south gravitational pull into the United States orbit, and argued strenuously against the lack of jurisdiction that we had, the rights that we had to make independent decisions, that they were going to be made by arbitration boards and the like. He didn't win that election, but he changed a lot of people's minds and almost changed the election. The polls moved dramatically. And it's interesting because two leadership debates that he was in with former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, both the 1984 election, was it 84 election, when he was on the receiving end of an incredible comment by Brian Mulroney that cost him votes big time. And then the leadership debate in 1988, where he gave better than he got to Brian Mulroney in regards to Brian Mulroney's free trade agreement, really showed how debates are so critical in Canadian politics, showed in 1988 his backbone and how he stood tall, even though in the end he lost. And I got to tell you, I've studied the free trade agreement a fair amount, both during that mini thesis I did at Harvard and then subsequently. What a lot of people forget is that the Canadian dollar went from par to about 67 cents or something like that by the early 1990s. And so therefore, we actually did go through a major wage and price reduction of, order of magnitude 30% that allowed us to adjust to the Canadian-U.S. free trade agreement. And I am convinced that if we had not had that standard of living, wage, and price reduction because of the depreciation, the dramatic depreciation in the Canadian dollar at the time. We would have needed some of those things that the Macdonald Royal Commission and John Turner were arguing for in a guaranteed annual income and transitional adjustment assistance. Anyway, what an incredible career. Prime Minister of Canada, Justice Minister, numerous other portfolios, and Finance Minister, and probably, other than maybe Paul Martin, probably one of the best, if not the best, prime finance ministers we've ever had in the history of Canada. So rest in peace, John Turner and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I hope to invite some friends of mine onto my show to talk about each one of them in the future. Thank you. That's the Brian Crombie Radio Hour for tonight. Good night.